my name is Lane. I've been with Moms since October when I met Ann door knocking. So I have always lived in Tennessee, and I think like many of you have been touched by gun violence with friends and family. And so really became interested in the gun laws in Tennessee. And then after 2023, the Covenant shooting, decided that I needed to do something more than just like yell into the abyss at Facebook, you know, and really do something that made a difference or that I felt was educational or changed people's opinion on things. So I started thinking about things that I could do because I had learned how to crochet, something I could do with my crochet that would educate people, maybe move them emotionally somehow to make change in the state, because the state of Tennessee has some very weak gun laws, and it's only gotten weaker over the last 10-15 years. So craftivism, there's a lot of people, I was on TikTok, and there's a lot of people on TikTok who are using crafts in a lot of ways to move their ideas forward. And they would use lives, they would use other things in order to get people to listen to whatever they wanted to share. And so I was thinking about how I could do that same thing with gun violence in Tennessee and how I could educate people. And I found a guy who was doing, he was crocheting a line a day. Well, he was doing a line per mass shooting. And so each time there was a mass shooting, he would choose a color that represented like the number of people who were injured or murdered, or was it in a school, or was it, you know, where was it? And he would use the color of the yarn to portray like what kind of event it was. And I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. So I also had seen people make temperature blankets, which the idea of a temperature blanket is you crochet a color or knit a color based on the temperature of that day. So if it's cold, you might knit a blue row. If it's warm, you might knit if it's warm, you would knit like a red row. So I took that idea and his idea about a row for the mass shootings, and I started working on this temperature blanket about gun violence in the state of Tennessee. So each row is a day. Each row is a color that represents the number of deaths for that day. And the darker red the color, the more deaths there were on that day. There is a key down here at the bottom that shows like how many each color is. But so what I decided to do was I looked at the gun violence archive. I started every day, but that was just too heavy to start my day with every day. So I moved it to once a week. I would check the gun violence archive and I would see how many deaths there have been each day in the state. And I collected their stories. The gun violence archive lists the name, like the victim's name, the perpetrator's name if it's known, and then we'll link to some news articles. So if there was a news article, I would try to find out something about that person, try to find the GoFundMe for the family so I could learn more about the person. And then I would kind of, pray about that person as I was knitting that row for the day. And then I would make a TikTok, because my second goal was not just to make this blanket, but to inform people about the laws in the state of Tennessee. So then I would make a TikTok sharing some bit of information that was relevant to the people that had passed that week. So we'll watch one here. And they're supposed to be kind of meditative, so. the idea. So I would look up the stories and then try to find a relevant law or some information that I could pull in that would help people understand why and what we could do to make things better in our state. So as I went through, someone in my sister's family passed away. So April 29th, Frank Platt, I don't know if you guys heard about this story, but he was riding in the car with his brother. They were in Raleigh, and he was shot in the car. He's from Nashville, and it made like pretty big news because he's from Nashville and he was here visiting his brother in Memphis. And so I had put a little tag with his name on it in April, but I think it fell off at the fair. So, but yeah, I had put his name on there to kind of really show his row and the impact that he had on people's lives. So, yeah, so I think a couple things that I learned from it. One, there will be trolls, and you just can't beat them. I did want to educate people, and so I did have lots of conversations in the comments of these videos. But if people were not trying to engage in a real way, they were just wanting to spout off, I pretty much just blocked them. I did have lots of good conversations with people though, because people would say stuff like, you know, if I register my gun, I should be able to take it anywhere I want. And I'm like, okay, well, let's start with if I register my gun, and let's talk about why not all guns have to be registered and how it's important to change that law. We want them to be registered so we know who's got them and we know that the right people have them. And I actually learned a lot about the dispossession before I knew what dispossession was. I learned a little bit about that because I would always see in the articles that someone was shot by a prohibited person, and it would be a domestic violence situation. A person was supposed to have dispossessed who didn't, and then murdered their domestic partner. So, so yeah, I think the main thing of it is really, like you said, engaging with the community in a way that's non-confrontational. Like, people are interested when they see you crocheting or they see you doing a craft. They will come up to you and just ask you questions, and you can slide in information about your thoughts as you're talking about your craft. And this one, obviously, I couldn't not talk about gun violence because it's literally the whole point of the thing. And so, yeah, created a lot of conversation. There are ways to get involved. I think you covered a few, but yeah, you can make wearable statements, you can stitch quotes, you can make remembrance flowers, you can make bracelets. I know, like, in the era of Taylor Swift, I brought stuff in case anybody wants to make a Taylor Swift-esque friendship bracelet. And yeah, you can craft and donate items to survivors as well. So those are other things you can do.
But you mentioned just the Mid-South Fair.
Oh yeah, so what I did after I made this blanket, I kind of wanted more people to see it locally because a lot of my followers on TikTok are actually not even from Tennessee. So I took the blanket and I entered it into the fair, which I have been entering into the fair for the past 3 years. So I entered into the fair. I wasn't sure if they would display it because of its semi-political nature. But they did display it. They even displayed it with the tag out so people could understand what it meant. And I got second place. Yay. So, not bad. Not bad.
What'd you say? What do you call the blanket again?
I just call it the Tennessee Gun Death Blanket. I'm sure there's like a nicer, more, clever thing I could call it, but I just call it Tennessee Gun Death Blanket.
And you've got the months in there?
Yeah, so you can see, well, you may not be able to see it very well, but if you come up and touch it, you can feel there's texture that shows you what month is what. So you can see time pass by. And if you look at the tag, you'll see also there's some colors that I didn't have to use, and that's because when I started planning, I was basing it on 2023 numbers, which was a record high year for gun deaths in the state of Tennessee. And 2024 actually had lower gun deaths, so there were actually colors that I didn't need to use at all, which was great. I mean, that's phenomenal.
How do you
my, name on TikTok is Hooked on Change TN. I'm on TikTok, Blue Sky, I don't post much on Blue Sky, but, and Instagram as well.
And we can include it on our page, on our Facebook page, so thanks, I got it, yours, yeah.
And I think these are, these do not include suicides, right? 'Cause
Correct, yes, so, yeah, that's a good point, these white rows, they are not actually rows where no one died, because the Gun Violence Archive doesn't report suicides, so, even on white days, you could assume there's 2 suicides for the state of Tennessee, at least.
I have a question about gun laws.
Oh, I may be able to.
I can't get this. So they always say on the news, they say, okay, we stopped this car and there were a whole bunch of guns in it. As if you're supposed to be shocked.
Mhm.
It's not illegal.
No, not,
So
I mean,
what's the big deal?
I think, you know, there's some people who have, been told that they're not supposed to own firearms, and so they shouldn't have them, and then there's also, illegal guns,
But what I'm saying is, the news
yeah,
pretends like that's a crime,
yeah,
but it's purposely not a crime.
yeah, and I think that's why we need to educate people more about the gun laws, because, I mean, in the state of Tennessee, it is not illegal to loan a firearm to someone who has been told that they are prohibited from owning firearms. Like, if my buddy
It's
wants
not?
to go camping and he's been dispossessed, I can loan him a firearm. It's not against any state law to do that.
Huh.
How long did it take you to make it?
I worked on it for a whole year, but I worked on it for probably like an hour or 2 a week, depending on how much research I needed to do into the people that passed. But like each row itself would take maybe 30 minutes, maybe 20, 30 minutes.
So this was 24, are you working on a project now?
I am, but I'm really far behind. So, because I felt like this blanket didn't really capture the full weight of gun deaths because it didn't include any suicides. So I started a project for this year where I'm crocheting a single flower for every person that passes. And I am adding 2 flowers per day for suicides as well. So
Average?
just the average. And so I'm really very far behind. I'm in May and it's October, so I didn't bring it because it's like not presentable. But yeah, I am working on something for this year.
We're halfway through.
Yeah.
Thank you, we're running late, so thanks a lot, we're not leaving right this second, but, before, I'm gonna interject myself in here, we have, hopefully we can continue this great